Lynn volunteered for the job of speaking with Dr. Stephen de Graaf, a neurologist and rehabilitation specialist who has worked with many polio survivors on the issues that they face as they age. Lynn was diagnosed with post-polio syndrome several years ago and lives with many of the typical symptoms that people with post-polio have to contend with.
I just get to the point with fatigue hitting me like a brick wall. I just sitting doing my craft work and all of a sudden all I want to do is fall asleep and I have to go and lay down. I just have to. Some days I try to force my way through it so that I'll have a decent sleep at night, but then I can sleep for an hour in the afternoon and still sleep 9 hours at night. It's horrible. It's just horrible. I was at work when I was working and I'd be falling asleep at the desk. That's when I decided to cut down to 3 days a week because I just needed that days in between to rest.
We know that the distribution of the median nerve as it comes through the hand, through the wrist into the hand.
Dr. de Graaf has been working with Lynn to try and improve her quality of life by alleviating some of the pain she suffers. She has been very patient. But when it came to asking the hard questions, Lynn cut straight to the chase.
When I first started with these symptoms, is it post-polio or late effects of polio?
Look, that's a really good question. It's one of those things that's hotly debated. I like to think about the post-polio syndrome as a progressive degeneration, wearing out of your nerves. It needs to be what we call a diagnosis of exclusion, because we need to rule out why you have the pain, why you have the fatigue, and why you have the weakness. But there are a lot of other things that can cause those features as well, and we need to rule those out before we come down to the diagnosis of post-polio syndrome. But once we rule out other conditions, then we can talk about post-polio syndrome. One of the things that we have to look at when we want to make the diagnosis of post-polio syndrome is how old you were when you had the original infection of poliomyelitis and how severe the infection was. Once we classify whether it's post-polio syndrome, then we look at the management of that. So we're looking at a progressive neurological condition. The late effects of polio are a different thing. What we're really talking about there is with all the wear and tear over the years because one of your limbs has not been as efficient as it should have been because of the original polio infection, other joints, other parts of your body get tired and worn out.
And that'd be what's happening with my shoulders.
Yes, that's exactly right. The wear and tear on your shoulders and your arms to carry the load that your legs can't carry has had its effects where you now get pain and fatigue in those areas. One of the things we do have to be careful with you though is that you did have a pretty severe attack of polio and you were at the age of 6. We often talk about being under the age of 5 as a positive feature. So you're at that borderline. So there's probably a combination. Now we know that your health is generally pretty good, so we probably exclude any other major cause of your fatigue, pain and weakness. But still we know that there's that constant biomechanical need on your upper limbs, your shoulders, your elbows, your hands and your wrists that is probably too challenging for your limbs to what they were made to do. The management is a little different because we know that the post-polio syndrome is a progressive disorder, whereas the late effects of polio may well be able to be compensated for.